Good afternoon and welcome to another program of the Veterans Forum. As usual, we are here in the studios of Pittsfield Community Television in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And today we have a special guest that is willing to and will help share some of his experiences with us. We'll start off with, Bill, would you tell us your name, please? Spell your last name and give us your dates of service and your branch of service.
You want my real name? Or?
No, the one you sign your checks with.
Okay, William C. Powers. What was the other thing you wanted?
Dates of service?
Dates of service. Okay, October 43 until April 46.
And the branch?
The branch was the Corps of Engineers,
Okay.
U.S. Army.
U.S. Army. Fine.
Corps of Engineers.
Okay, thank you. Now, to build a little chronology and so forth, we'll stop a little bit backwards. Would you tell us, please, where were you born, when were you born, and how was life growing up before you got into the service?
Oh, I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, May 22nd, 1925. My life growing up was pretty normal, no big problems. I went through high school, and after high school I went to work in a shipyard in Providence until I got my first draft notice. So I went in for my physical. This was in probably August. Went in for my physical and promptly flunked it. So.
Any reason?
My eyes, probably.
Oh.
I had already tried to join the Army, the Navy, the Coast Guard. I was smart enough not to think about the Marine Corps, but they wouldn't have me for the same reason, bad eyesight. I had quit my job at the shipyard because I figured I was going to get picked up right away, so I kind of goofed off until September when I was recalled, and I still have the splinters where I sit from the bottom of the barrel in which I was in because they took me in and sent me to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. I sat there for 5 weeks before they found a square hole for my square peg to go in, which was at Fort Belvoir in Alexandria, Virginia. I went 17 weeks of basic training in infantry basic and Corps of Engineers combat engineer training. At the end of the 17 weeks, I was shipped to Camp Claiborne in Louisiana, where I became a member of the 1783rd Engineer Parts Supply Company, which was a interesting organization.
In what manner?
Well, it was made up of, as we called ourselves, the Belvoir boys. It was probably about 15–20% of us. A lot of them were fresh draftees, and the balance were ASTP students from the University of Alabama. That ASTP program having been canceled, according to these guys, these fellas, the Army put the highest students with the highest grades in the Corps of Engineers, and the balance went back to their infantry units. So we had this mix of college boys and us old vets. And
18,
I was
19,
18, yeah, something like that. and these new draftees. So we consequently had to take a second infantry basic training and a smattering of combat engineer training. We had been told that we would be the cadre and do the training at this new company. But older and wiser and sharper non-coms got the jobs, and they knew diddly squat about what we were supposed to be doing. There were 5 basic privates in the company on the table of organization. I was one. My friend Pacello was one. Charlie Lippo was one. Jerry Liebler was one.
These all buddies of yours?
We all hung together.
Oh, okay.
Dominic Pizzuto, and I forget the third guy. So we were pretty much the bottom of the barrel. We didn't really do an awful lot. Tried to stay out of trouble. After we got through with the basic training there, they sent us to Columbus, Ohio to learn warehousing because we were going to be a supply company overseas. So what we learned in Columbus was how to pack stuff to be shipped overseas.
Well, the Cosmoline gang.
Oh, Cosmoline and degreasing and the whole 9 yards. Why we learned how to do it, because when we got overseas, the only thing we did learn was that we're going to have to take all this garbage off when the stuff came to us in the warehouse. We left Columbus in September, and we were shipped to Camp Miles Standish outside Taunton, Massachusetts.
Down the Cape.
On the Cape, well, yeah, close to the Cape. And we had some time off. I went home, saw the family, went into Boston, went to the old Howard, the usual things that runaways from home take care of. And we were told strictly not to tell anybody where we were because it was classified. Then we figured out when we got to Boston, how are we going to get back to Miles Standish without telling somebody that we want to go to Miles Standish? But that was not something they ever thought too seriously about. So we went down to the bus station, and the starter is yelling, "This is the last bus to Camp Miles Standish." So that took care of that. We knew where we were going, and everybody else did too. Some of the older guys were in a bar talking to some women, and the women asked them where they were stationed, and they said, "Well, we can't really say." And they said, "Well, you all got brand new uniforms on, and Mabel, what ship's in harbor now?" "Well, there's this, there's that, and the other thing." Well, it turned out we went on the Wakefield. These women knew the ships, when they were leaving, the whole 9 yards. So the security was a joke. Well, we got on the Wakefield, which was had been a ocean liner before the war.
What, a cruiser? Or?
It was a cruise line ship. It was a big one. And it had burned off Iceland. And they tossed up whether they'd salvage it or junk it, but they salvaged it and made it into a troop transport. It had been the Manhattan before the war, the SS Manhattan. We left, we were held up one day because of the 44 hurricane. The ship didn't leave in the hurricane.
Where was your POE?
Boston.
Oh, okay.
We were out of Boston. I had a friend who had been AWOL, came from Southie, John Roach. And so he was restricted to the company area. He couldn't go anywhere. They wouldn't let him go anywhere, go home to see his mother or any of that stuff. And we stood on the deck of the Wakefield, and he says, "You see that Pilgrim Rum sign over there?" And I said, "Yeah, a big sign up on the top of a building." He says, "I live about 2 blocks from there." And I really felt, bad for the guy. I mean, he'd been AWOL, but good Lord, he should have been able to go home and see his mother. In any case, we left, and the Atlantic Ocean, which is, I guess, never very calm, was horrendously rough. And I spent 5 days. Thank God it was only a 5-day trip. I spent 5 days in my bunk. I was sick as a dog. I had grown up on Narragansett Bay sailing and rowing and in boats all my life.
But you couldn't hack it?
I couldn't hack that. That was, oh God, that was awful.
Were you in a top bunk or a lower bunk?
It didn't really matter.
Not to you, but if you were in the top bunk.
No, I wasn't in the top bunk. Okay. And I contained myself until I got to the head. I did try to eat a couple of times, but the stairway to the mess hall, or the entry to the mess hall was in the top of the room. So when they opened the door, the smell of the food would come up, and I would get to the door, and I would immediately head back to the bunk. I think I ate O. Henry bars for most of the trip. That's all I did eat.
For 5 days?
I didn't eat them all the time, but we got to Liverpool a day behind schedule. Why this ship wasn't torpedoed, I don't know. It was on a bus trip back and forth all the time. And I met a buddy. It was run by the Coast Guard, and I met a guy that had gone to Hope High School with me, and he came into our compartment after we had landed, drunk as a skunk. And he had had a date with a young woman who was supposed to have a date with a young woman, but when he got there a day late, she was out with somebody else, so he just got tanked. Incidentally, my watch had broken, the strap had broken, and he took my watch home and gave it to my parents to get fixed. And
back across the pond?
Well, when he went back, there were 5 guys in the crew that had gone to Hope High School, all of them. And I met one of them, who happened to live down the street from where I grew up. They didn't make much of it, but later on I got a clipping from the Providence Journal of a picture of the 5 guys and an Air Force officer who was coming home, who had also gone to Hope. I guess they didn't publicize going east. Anyway, we landed in Liverpool and immediately got on a train and went to Southampton, straight to Southampton. We got on a boat called the Antenor and crossed the channel to Normandy. It was very rough. I wasn't sick on that trip, but it was very rough, and they couldn't land us because we were going down the nets in LCIs, just the way the combat people did. This is on D plus 133, I think it was.
So the Big Bang had gone by.
Well, that was long gone. They were in Paris by this time. So eventually we got off the Antenor, and I always thought this was a little 3-island freighter. And when I found pictures of it, I was stunned because it was a liner. It was a beautiful ship, but we didn't see all of it. We just saw our little segment, you know. And anyway, they put us on the beach, loaded us up in 6x6s, and drove us to an apple orchard outside Valognes in Normandy, near a town, Montebourg. And they dumped, by this time it is dark. And as you saw from the pup tent, we put up our tents. We happened to put our tent, my friend and I, Arthur Marcus, up against a wall. But the other people were out in the middle of the orchard, and they were kind of out of luck because the cows also used this field. And several of them several of them had to relocate, as it were. We were there nobody knew we were there. We were on nobody's ration list. We got no rations except the sea rations we had and what we could get from the apples. And the apples in that orchard were the bitterest, sourest apples I've ever seen in my life. Beautiful red apples. The only sweet apples were green apples in another orchard. We just sat around in the mud because we were there from September until November. Because they had no idea
you were there.
Not that we weren't there, but not that where we were going to be relocated. So we just hung around. We sat by our little fire and finally got some food. I think the first thing we got was a dehydrated pea soup. I'm getting, some of this is scatological, I can't help it, but thank God we had an open-ended pup tent, is all I can say. And we wandered around, and because we had nothing to do and there was no details, no duty. The only detail was probably digging slit trenches for the toilets. And we were in, this friend of mine, John Roach, the one who I mentioned earlier, we were in a quarry. And there's a big...
A quarry?
A stone quarry.
Yeah, oh.
And there was a big wheel with it had a chain that pulled the stone up to the top, up a track. And I took the wheel and gave it a yank. And at the same time, there was a horrendous explosion. Well, we'd been warned about booby traps, and it scared the living, whatever it is that we have in our bowels, out of us. And we flew up out of the quarry, and it turned out it was a couple of other GIs who had found some mortar shells, and they were throwing them into into
Down
the
in the
quarry,
hole.
and it blew up. Another time, I forget who was, probably Arthur and I, we found a 155 millimeter artillery shell. And we very wisely left it where it was, but we very unwisely told people where it was, and they went out and got the darn thing. And they were busy trying to get the fuse out of it, you know, and they put the fuse in, they key it so that it won't come out when it's spinning. And they were trying to get this out of the thing. We had been collecting apples for the farmer. The farmer said, if you collect the apples, I'll give you some Calvados when I get through with it. So we had a pile of apples that was probably, 5 or 6 feet high and equally like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we took off, and one of the guys, Woody Galladay was the one. Woodrow Wilson Galladay from Clifton Forge, Virginia. We went by raced around the pile of apples, and here's Woody down on his knees with his fingers in his ears. And I said, Woody, what are you doing? He says, well, if that goes off, I don't want to hear it. I said, if that goes off, you're going to be applesauce. Don't worry about it. So he took off with us. They finally didn't get it out, and they got rid of it. Another time, Arthur and I walked into Valone in the afternoon, and we found a butcher's shop, and we bought what we thought was beef. It could have been horse meat, but we bought a kilo. That's about 2.2 pounds. And we brought it back to the company area. By that time, it was sprinkling rain, and everybody had gone to bed. It was dark. We stoked up the fire, and we were cooking this piece of meat over the flames. And all of a sudden, these ghosts appeared, coming out with the blankets over their head because they could smell the steak.
Yeah,
well,
the aroma,
we got very little of it ourselves, but everybody had a good time eating the steak or horse, whatever. Eventually, they found a place for us to go in Dijon, which is down in Burgundy. And as luck would have it, there was a fleet of weapons carriers that had to go up toward the front. So we became the convoy that took the trucks up to the front with a stop with a stop at Versailles, I think. We had the usual stop the military has every so often. So we dedicated a portion of ourselves to that
area.
Lovely spot.
Yeah.
But we ended up in Dijon and spent, I'd say probably a week in an abandoned apartment house while they set up the warehouse and built some barracks. And we had some French prefab barracks that we lived in. They were very airy and very loaded with mice. And I still wasn't doing much. I was pretty much a flunky for most of the time I was in the. I could have stayed home and worked in the
Done the same
shipyard.
thing, huh?
and made a little more money at it. But I did get a job when they were pouring the foundations for this building. I got the opportunity to wheel a barrel full of concrete while a German prisoner tipped the wheel and dumped the concrete into the wheelbarrow.
Okay.
I never could figure that out. You know, this is a big, rugged Alpini trooper, you know, the mountain troop. And he was a big, handsome kid, but he had this job,
Well, that's probably why he got the job.
and I'm lugging the bucket. The captain had seen some Italian tiles that he wanted to try out to build up a Quonset hut. Somebody had seen them used in Italy. They were shaped like wine bottles, about so long. And the idea was you
Stack them up.
Yeah. And they built a frame, a Quonset-shaped frame, and they stacked all the wine bottles up, and they pulled the thing out, it collapsed. And they tried it 3 times. It just was a waste of time.
Were they empty or full while they were working?
No, these were tiles. These were,
Oh,
they were
okay.
clay tiles.
Okay.
No.
I thought
No.
you meant a
No.
little flagon of juice.
No, there's no juice in them, unfortunately, or fortunately. I was asleep one night, probably 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was awakened by the orderly, the CQ. And he says, "You're on guard duty." I said, "No, I'm not. You got permanent guards." He said, "Not anymore." He says, "Now you're on guard duty." So I got up and I got dressed and I went up to the orderly room, and we got into a a weapons carrier, and there were 3 of us. There was Charlie Lippo and myself and a guy named John Zillick from Detroit. And we're driving out to the area, and John says to me, "Now, just don't talk about what we do out here, okay? Just keep it cool." So we get out to the area, and we jumped out of the truck, and we went into what it was a half-finished apartment house. And we walked into the back, and there in the back, the permanent guards had built themselves a shack with 2x4s and tar paper. I think we had 2 bunks, a chair, a Coleman lantern, magazines, blankets, and we never walked. I had walked the post once before the permanent guard was on. We were out walking around what they call the outside storage, things like pipeline equipment, lumber,
Okay.
heavy stuff, pile driver weight. No, and who's going to drive a 2-ton pile driver weight? But anyway, so and there was one building that had fuses in it for mines and that sort of thing, and explosives.
Mm-hmm.
But we never, in the 2 months I think it was, we had this detail, were we ever visited by the corporal of the guard, the officer of the guard. Nobody came near us, and we rarely, if ever, left the hut. And it was a beautiful deal because we were on for 4 hours, and then we were off for 4 hours. And then we were on for 4 hours again, and then we were off for 8 hours, and on for 4 hours, and off for 24 hours. So we had,
Mathematical.
We had, I don't know, I don't understand it. I really don't understand how they worked it, but that's the way it was.
And
So
the
we had a lot
you
of.
had that permanent assignment for the 2 months?
Yeah, well, there were other guards.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
there were probably 2 other groups. I don't even know who they were. Never did know them. Never met them. And so we had that until we moved and made our next move when the front had proceeded beyond wherever, and we moved up to Toul, up in Alsace-Lorraine, where we lived in an old French cavalry school building that the Germans had occupied. And we were there until the war was over.
That was your permanent station then?
We have till the war was over.
Okay.
We were. In fact, we marched in a victory parade in Toul, and the band was playing something called Sambre et Meuse, the River Sambre and the River Meuse. It's a French march, military march, that had a weird beat, and. I never could march well. Whenever there was a dress parade or something like that when I was in basic training, they always said, "You go stuff bayonet dummies," which suited me fine because these guys would stand out there in the hot sun, sweating with their kit all
Been
spread
there.
out. Well, I missed 2 of those. Stuffing bayonet dummies. So I really wasn't much of a marcher. And I eventually, figured out if I did a 2-step, dance step, I could keep up with them, right? So I 2-stepped all the way through this idiot parade. When Roosevelt died, we were there, and when Roosevelt died, and we were restricted to the area, we were not allowed to do anything. And at that time in my life, since my father was a diehard Republican, I was too. I really didn't feel the pain that other people felt when he died. And I still was only 19 years old, so. We stayed there for until late June, sometime around there. And
Now,
then-
had you been set up and were doing your function, your thing?
yeah,
to
well, my
supply-
thing there was I was working in the warehouse, and my only claim to fame in this warehouse was that I numbered every bin in the warehouse, all 2,000 of them, with my first experience with a felt tip pen.
Wow.
Well, they were, in those days, it was a reservoir you filled, and had a felt tip that you could replace. So numbering all these silly bins. And I did work in the warehouse there. I had picked up a crow feather and stuck it in my fatigue hat. And one of the Frenchmen who worked in the warehouse would call me Monsieur Corbeau, it's Mr. Crow.
Mr. Crow.
And he's a nice guy. He invited us up to his house, and we had a glass of wine with him, and it was nice. And the rumor was that we were going to be stationed there for the duration. We weren't going to move. So I had written home to my mother to send me, I'm a model, as you know, and I wrote to her to send me a ship model to build while I was sitting there. And then all of a sudden, no, you're not staying. You're going down to Marseille to the, where am I? To Marseille to ship out to someplace unknown. So we rode boxcars, 40 and 8s. I can belong to that club.
A lot of people did.
From Toul to Arles. Excuse me, I should have taken that glass of water.
I can get you some if you want some.
No, I'm all right. We got down there and we sat around for quite a while. We had to have more shots because we were going to the Pacific. And in the Army, when you get ready for shots like that, massive shots, you wear your uniform is raincoats and helmet liners, and that's it, and your shoes. And with the dust and the heat and the perspiration, we were caked in dust. And we got, I think, 3 or 4 shots, one on this arm, 2 on this arm, 1 on that arm.
Bingo, bingo, bingo.
Right. And saw in the Stars and Stripes a picture of some troops disembarking in Manila. And it was entitled the 1783rd Engineer Part Supply Company landing in Manila. Well, we knew that couldn't be quite true.
Because you were here.
Because we were still sitting here. Anyway, we did get on a troop transport, the Butner, I think the name of it was, and left Marseille. And the only time I was even close to seasick is in the Mediterranean when we went by the Balearic Islands, and it was just squeezy. I think we went through the straits at about 4 o'clock in the morning. The sun was bright, and the announcement came, if you wanted to see the rock, you had to get up and go.
Gibraltar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we all got up, and of course from the sea, you don't see the rock the way it is in the Prudential ads. It's the back side of it. So we all said, to hell with it, and went back to bed. Went through the Panama Canal. Had a layover in Panama because we had to wait our turn to go through the canal. And we got 57 bags of mail. My company got 57 bags of mail. I got the model my mother sent me, which was not what I figured it was, and it went in the round file because it wasn't something I wanted. Anyway, I was not very nice about it. I got a change of address from a friend of mine who had been let go in the service. He'd been in the training as a bombardier gunner. And I think a letter from somebody else. I bought some stuff and shipped it home. I don't remember what it was. And then we went out through the canal, and I think the first stop was at Azore Island, where the 3rd Fleet headquarters had their R&R area.
Oh, yeah.
And we were sitting there, because everybody's saying, what's going to happen, what's going to happen? Before we knew it, we were taken ashore. Our company was taken ashore to work in a warehouse. They had taken some troops off before to work in the warehouse, but they didn't make it. They weren't very adept at that sort of thing, and obviously we had some knowledge. So we were 10 days on the beach eating Navy chow or Seabee chow. And my first meal was Sunday night. Well, the Sunday night Army meal is cold cuts, usually. You know, it's nothing because the cooks are off. They're not going to waste time with peons like us. I got half a fried chicken, mashed potatoes, a slab of ice cream that must have been 3/4 of a pint. I said, how many people do I have to share this with? And they go, no,
that's yours.
That's yours. Go, get moving. Well, we ate like kings for the 10 days we were there. We got back on the ship, and the Marine Guards were carrying sidearms they hadn't had before. And we wondered what that was, and there'd been close to a mutiny while we were off the boat.
Oh.
The troops are sitting around. It's almost 100 degrees. It can't go anywhere. There's no breeze, and they were just going nuts. And I don't blame them. And we moved from there to, Weetalk. I think that's right, because I haven't been
You're
able
going
to
right. You're going heading west.
Yes. And we were in Eniwetok when they dropped the bombs. And I've got to tell you, I had read science fiction, and I knew a little bit about some of that stuff. And it gave me a queasy feeling when they described the bomb, as an atomic bomb. Oh, thank you. Here's how.
Thank you, Ryan.
Cheers.
Cheers. Now.
Who put the pineapple juice in my pineapple juice? And then the rumors were going around, what are you going to do? So they shipped it. We ended up moving to Okinawa. And we were on Okinawa from September until April of '45. And
were you relieving some other outfit?
no, we were sent over there to be we were going to supply the Corps of Engineers, the combat engineers, with supplies for the invasion of the main islands. That's basically what we were going to do. But obviously that was all off. So we did have a warehouse, and I guess we did supply some people's stuff, but not much. We went through 2 typhoons that I remember. I had bought a pair of Navy jeans on Mogmog Island, where the 3rd Fleet Rest and Recreation area was. That was an interesting island. It seemed to me that it was divided in thirds. 1/3 was for the Swabbies, 1/3 was warehouse, and no, it wasn't either. It was 1/4 was for the Swabbies and 1/4 was warehouse, and the other half was for the officers. We're not thrilled with officers. Anyway, I bought these Navy jeans and had to wash them when they were hanging on the line when the first typhoon hit, and they went off
they're gone.
halfway to China by then. And we were living in tents, and our tent was set up right outside one of the tombs, not in the the courtyard, but outside the courtyard. Yeah. And we survived pretty well. The next one, we were in 2-man tents, and we spent most of that time playing pinochle in a squad tent with a bunch of the other guys. The water was going through the mess hall this way. The rain was just going straight across. And we listened to the radio, and the destroyers at sea were having an awful time. They were losing troops overboard. Yeah. And we could pick this up on the short wave. But we didn't really do much. I had another buddy. This was Vince Pacello, who's from Jersey City. He and I shared a 2-man tent. And when we were walking out one day, we found this cat, a little kitten about that big. So kind of a calico cat with a stubby tail. And we picked it up and we stuck her in the field jacket pocket, which fit easily. We brought her back and fed her cheese and whatever rations we could sconder up for her. She grew up to be a nice little cat and got stolen or eaten, disappeared anyway. And as I said before, somebody mentioned that I had tonsillitis, and they opted to give me sulfur pills instead of shipping me to Guam for.
Well, you had the choice, though, didn't you?
I didn't have the choice. No, this was their decision. I was a private. Privates don't have decisions. Oh no, I'm sorry. I was a PFC at this time. We didn't make decisions. And it was fortunate for me that this happened because one of my close friends from high school was in the 86th Division, who had gone to Manila and were in Batangas province down in the Philippines. And they had I guess they had a 24-hour pass or a 3-day pass, and they were supposed to go to Manila and have fun, but Bill wanted to go out to the airport. He took his friend, another Bill, out to the airport, and they said, let's go up to Okinawa and see Powers. So they found a flight going to Tokyo with a gas stop on Okinawa, so they came up to Okinawa, and I was recuperating. I think I was still on my sack when I hear this. My nickname at the time was Teaser.
Caesar?
Teaser.
Oh.
Teaser, you know. And I hear this voice calling my nickname, and oh my God in heaven above. And I go out and hear these two clowns, and they were going to spend the weekend and then get a flight back. Well, they went back. You keep looking over there. Am I wandering too much?
No. I'm just making sure that we're on track.
Are we on track?
Yeah, all right there.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
I'm glad you're good.
So I couldn't drive. I never got an Army license, and I never drove before the war. And I had this John Roach again, my buddy John, took him out to the airport. It's an early morning, Sunday
flight back.
Well, nothing was going south. Everything was going north.
No.
So they were back at 5 o'clock. They stayed there all day waiting for they were with me for a week before they found a plane going back to the...
Well, were they AWOL at the time?
Oh, sure they were AWOL.
Okay.
If they'd known, of course they were AWOL. And that's all they got charged with. I think if they'd known they were off the island, they would have really thrown the book at them. But
Yeah, send to Okinawa or someplace.
so they got back. He wrote to his mother and told her it was worth it. So that made my mother feel pretty good,
Okay.
because the mothers were close. And that's about it. We came home in April, and on the Admiral Ernst. I don't know why I can remember these things, but I do.
Was it another cruise ship converted?
No, this was a Kaiser-built troop transport.
The Bucklers.
The Squeakers and the Moaners, yes. And we came, and I was sick on this trip too, for a good portion of the time. And we got caught in the tail end of the tsunami that hit Hilo, Hawaii in April that year, 45. So the seas were
A little rough.
a little on the steep side. There was a fleet oiler that went by us, a small one, not too far away from us, and half the time you couldn't see the hull because the waves were. And I was in my bunk, and this Air Force officer came down. He says, you really ought to get up topside where you can see what's going on. I said, I tried that. It doesn't work. I finally got my sea legs and had a good meal, and they immediately put me on guard duty. Why we needed guards is beyond me, but they wanted to keep us happy.
Keep you busy.
Keep us busy. And they put me right up in the bow, in the very bow. Now, the bow of a ship, when it's that way, isn't up and down or this way. It's this way. And I told the corporal of the guard, I said, you'd better find a supernumerary because I'm not going to last 10 minutes. And he wasn't out of sight before I lost the first good meal I'd had in a week. After that, I got pretty well settled down, and we came in through the Golden Gate, and I was lucky to be on deck and saw the bridge go under us or over us, as the case may be. And We landed there, and we were shipped by ferry boat up to Pittsburgh, California.
Pittsburgh? Wow, that's a new one.
Well, there was a big replacement depot there. And we had our first decent meal since we left the States. And the thing that sticks in my mind, I'm a milk drinker, have been all my life. And the only thing that didn't, that stuck in my imagination, what was going to taste good was the glass of milk. It still hung in there as the best thing I had. We had steak, rare, the whole 9 yards. Excuse me. And they put us on a train and shipped us back to Fort Devens. We had a stop in Utah. I sent a telegram home that I was in the States and coming home, which I still have. We got at Fort Devens. I got off the train not 50 feet from where I got on the train.
Oh, way back when.
I said, and when I got on the train, I can remember saying, I don't ever want to see this place again. And I was so glad to see it when we landed, and that was about it.
When you got home, any kind of a wild reception, or did you just kind of walk in and say, Mom, I'm home, what's for supper?
Basically, that was it, yeah.
Which, the fore or the aft?
No, it was no big deal.
Okay.
Because I had two brothers that were in. One was in the Coast Artillery. That's what I tried to get in, but they weren't taking anybody. His overseas duty was Fisher's Island, New York. He never left Newport. Well, he did. He went down to the Cape for a while. He was home every weekend and home every...
Well, ladies' home companion.
My other brother was a tech sergeant in the Air Force. Taught link trainers. Had link trainer operation. Mm-hmm. So they were both out before I was. My brother Dick was in. He was in the National Guard before the war. So he was in for the year and a day.
Yeah.
And then when they got called up, so he was in just shy of 7 years in the service.
When you get home now, did you join any veterans out like the VA
No,
or anything like
no.
that? How about the GI Bill? Did you take advantage of that?
I certainly did. I certainly did. I'm glad you brought that up because I was one of the strongest proponents of the 52-20 Club that ever existed. I think I was on it for almost 50 weeks. I had no intention of getting a job. I wanted to go right back to school. And I went to the School of Design and applied for admission, and they turned me down because my high school grades were not sufficiently good.
Oh, goodness.
Well, to be honest, I was lucky to get out of high school, I was carrying 3 Englishes. That's the irony of my life. I was flunking 3 Englishes at once, and I ended up writing.
Well.
So...
how'd you get into the writing bracket of
Oh,
business?
that's when I went with GE. That was a long time later. I did go to art school. I went to a little fly-by-night outfit in Boston called Scott Cobby School of Art. I went there for 3 years and studied commercial art and worked in window trimming in Providence in a department store. And I was in the enlisted reserves. I did stay in that, and I was at Pine Camp when I got a note from my boss at the store that I was getting a 10% raise in salary because I'd been there 6 months. And I said, wow, that's great. And then I stopped to think I was only making $25 a week to begin with. So, $27.50 wasn't good.
No, but it's better than nothing.
Well, I was fed up and I quit. And about that time, my wife-to-be was working in Burlington,
Vermont.
Vermont.
Okay.
Had a friend who was a sailor, and she had a friend who was a sailor and also was doing his freelance window display work, and he was looking for help. So I went up and interviewed with them and got a job with him and worked with him. I think we worked together for 2 or 3 months, and he realized that he couldn't pay me and make enough to survive, so he got a job at GE. This guy you could ask him to do something that he had never done before in his life, and he'd say, oh yeah, I'll do that, and he'd do it. It's a disgusting person. So he went to work for GE, and as I laughingly say, he gave me the business. He kept one of the better accounts, but I had all the others, and I worked at this for probably, well, until we were married. I was married by then, and I worked at it until Shirley was pregnant with our first child, and then I figured I have to go to work, you know, make a living.
Make a steady income.
So I fortunately had friends who had friends, and I went to work for a printer as a salesman artist, and I worked for him for 5 years. And all the time, Bob Vogel, my buddy that had given me the business, was trying to get me in GE. And every time I'd be ready to go in, he'd call me up and say, well, they're having a layoff.
Yeah.
So eventually...
That's not a hiring policy.
So eventually I got into GE and worked as an expediter in technical publications.
Okay.
And then eventually ended up expecting to be laid off because there was a big contract that the government canceled, and then went to Mississippi. By this time I had, to answer your earlier question, I had 4 children. I had Billy, the oldest, and then Rebecca and Sarah and Martha. And I was offered to, when they got my resume down in Mississippi, or actually it was in Huntsville, Alabama, they...
This is with GE now.
This is still GE.
Okay.
And the guy was on the phone, the relations guy was on the phone to the relations guy in Huntsville, and he called me over. My office was as close to me as that camera is. And I went over, and he says, I got this guy in Huntsville on the phone. He wants to know if you're serious about this job. I said, I've got 4 kids, and I'm getting laid off in December. Of course I need a job. Well, are you really sure? I said, yes. Do you have to talk to your wife? I said, no. So I went down to Huntsville on an interview, and I took a portfolio of stuff that I had done, and
Yeah.
my new boss-to-be was impressed enough to offer me the job. He didn't really offer me the job. That was the funny thing. I was in talking to the relations guy, and Tom stuck his head in, and the fellow says, well, what do you think, Tom? And Tom says, oh, he's got the job if he wants it. I didn't catch that until I was flying home, that he'd offered me the job. So I took the job and lived in Huntsville. We moved the family down in December of 40. What year did Kennedy die? 63?
Could be.
Yeah, well,
I don't remember that.
I
one
went
at all.
down on the 11th of November, 2 days before he was assassinated. And we lived there for 6 months and then moved to Pass Christian in Mississippi, where we lived for 6 years. We were involved in the Apollo program, testing the first and second stages of the Saturn V. And as I've often said, it was the best mistake I ever made going to work down there, because it was a fun job. It was great. I had a lot of fun there. And when the contract was over, I could see the handwriting on the wall, and I didn't want to get caught in an exodus as I had done in Burlington. So I started looking and ended up getting a job in Pittsfield, where you had the bad fortune of meeting me and several other people as well. And I worked there until I retired in '84.
Then after you retired, what did you do to keep busy and out of trouble?
Everything.
I know some of it.
Well,
For example.
my oldest daughter was the manager of the museum shop out at Hancock Shaker Village, and she would have a customer come in to buy a chair, that she didn't have in stock, and they didn't want to wait 6 months for the factory to make it. So Rebecca, knowing that I was handy, asked me if I'd like to put one together, and I started putting chairs and tables and
You did good work.
I did damn good work, and I always thought she was, because she only gave me $50 or something like that for a chair, and I always figured she was giving the customer a break. Well, she wasn't. She was charging them full price, you know, just as what it would cost from the factory. Anyway, Becca's very tight with money, especially somebody else's, and even her own. So I did that, and I got into the Berkshire Highlanders pipe band. I played with them for 20
Give us
years.
a little bit of a history then on how you developed the tartan.
Oh, good Lord.
That's interesting. See.
Yeah, well, we were wearing secondhand uniforms. We had something called the Prince Charles Edward Stewart red tartan kilts, which we bought secondhand. And we felt, at least I felt, we should have our own tartan. So I started on GE time. My dad, at lunchtime usually, I would sit down with the felt pens and I'd put together different sets. Set is the pattern.
The weave, yeah.
And I finally found one I liked. And by this time I knew thread counts and how to put the number of thread down for each colors. And I went down, we played down on a mountain at some games. And there was a fellow down there, I forget his name, Sandy St. Clair, who was a peddler of Scottish things. And I was talking to him about getting some woven up. He said, oh, they'll weave you a yard. I said, well, get him to weave me a yard then. I'll pay for it. Well, I didn't see him again until the next year. And he said, oh, they won't weave a yard anymore. They have to weave a kilt length. That's 8 or 9 yards.
Oh. And it's not cheap.
And it's, well, not cheap. No, it's not. It's not 20 cents a yard by any stretch. But I said, well, how much will that cost? He said, oh, maybe $150, $200. I said, so make one up for me. So he sent the set to Scotland. And I got a letter back from him saying, if they weave it the way you've designed it, it'll take up this much space. So start pulling. So I went, then when I really realized how thick a thread was, I would pull out threads here and there until I got it down to a manageable width, which is about 8 inches. And they wove me a kilt. And when it came, it was shipped right to my home. I opened the box. And in all honesty, I don't think I could have been prouder, you know, of that piece of cloth. I still have that one. I can't wear it anymore. Never could. It was all screwed up on the sides. But it was beautiful. And the band had been saying, oh, yeah, sure, we can do that. So I took it in and I said, well, what do you think? And oh, God, they were excited. So we ordered, I think, about 10 or 15 kilts. And that's basically how I got off on the
Now that is registered now as the
That's
Greylock
registered
tartan.
as the Greylock tartan belonging to the Berkshire Highlanders.
Yep.
I have a certificate from the Tartan Society, and it used to be in Carmary, Scotland. The funny thing is that when I got the tartan and I did the thread count on what they had woven and what I had sent, it wasn't the same. They had judiciously removed threads, but unfortunately didn't tell me.
But it still was
But
pleasing.
still, yeah, oh yeah, it's all right. So it's just, and its third iteration, the first batch were a disaster. The yarn was screwed up. And the second batch was better. I had that done myself. And the third batch, somebody changed everything around again. So, but that's the way it was with the tartan.
survive.
And the cap badge. I did the cap badge too.
Now, kind of a wrap-up real quick. all your experience in the service and thereafter, what is your reaction to the time you spent in the service? Did it do you some good? Did it give you any kind of a feeling of accomplishment?
Not really accomplishment. To be honest with you, as I said before, I could have stayed home in the shipyard and probably accomplished as much. I don't think everybody was in that boat, but I think I didn't take the war seriously. I mean, my part of it.
Okay. But it had to be done.
Well, somebody had to do it. And I think, I don't know, I don't know where I was going with anything. But it was good. It was all right. No complaints.
All right.
I think all kids truly believe that. I think young guys out of high school ought to put 2 years in the service.
Just to kind of get their ducks
Just to
lined
grow up.
Yeah.
I think I did a lot of growing up.
Most
I
of
never
us-
totally grew up because I'm still an idiot, but
I never argued with an expert, Bill. No, seriously, we do thank you, and it's been a lot of fun talking with you, and I know we joke about it a lot, but we appreciate what you've done and what you
sure.
said.
Well,
And as Bob Tunnicliffe would say, put your hand out, man.
don't make fun of it.
Okay. Well, that's another wrap, folks. We thank you for staying with us and listening. And again, as we've said before, any and all people, veterans, male or female, who'd like to share their stories with us, we're here to do it. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon. Good night.